Hey, this is Dylan, California Superbike School. This is a tour of the Ridge Motorsports Park. Let's do it. Alright, front straightaway here. Very long, very straight. And we've got options to run a chicane or go straight. And we go straight. That way you can go pretty fast, actually. You can get the bikes to indicate deep into the 160s on a stock 1000, perhaps even more if you've got a savage rider. But regardless, we're going straight here. At this point, the references are hard to pick up. So one of the first things that you can use is just the track entrance. So we can see where the track entrance is and then where it ends over on the right. And that's a good general reference on where to get the bike turned. You don't necessarily want to turn it right where that begins, but shortly after that. And then turn one, if you're entering it fast enough, ends up being really just a drawn out braking zone. Braking all the way down here. We're trailing the brakes, basically grinding the front tire, and then pointing to the outside of the track for turn two. From here, it goes pretty steeply uphill. We want to get a bit of a late apex. They got a couple apex cones really at pretty much every corner. And coming up here, it's blind. You want to turn mid-track right about here. And then as you're cresting, pull in next to these convenient double cones for the apex. And right now we've got a blind rise again. And in this case, this is where you have to figure out where on the blind horizon you want to aim at. So let's aim more or less mid-track. And as we do, the next corner pops into view. And we want to just kiss this apex and intentionally run out wide towards that yellow cone. And then we're going to bring it back in, again, to those handy double apex cones. And this is where a good drive can start driving rather hard. And of course it gently goes to the left, gently to the right, and you try and straighten it out as much as you can. And you can build up a pretty good head of steam. And this is where we get into one of the more tricky corners on the track. Why is it tricky? Well, how much can we see? Not a whole lot. As far as where to turn the bike in, there's actually a lot of choices in this corner. We could go in mid-track or we could go out wide, but there isn't any particular advantage of going super wide. I like to go somewhat mid-track coming in. Now we're going to come in and we're going to treat this as a double apex corner. So if your speed's good, you're going to come in, you're going to hit this first apex, and from here we're not going to conform to the inside of the corner. We're going to let it drift out to more or less mid-track. And then from here, there's a little bit of a secondary steering input, and then we're going to slowly roll the throttle on. But we're not going to dive down to the inside of the corner abruptly, but rather slowly come in to kiss this later apex. At this point, we're bringing the bike up straight, and again, we got another one of these blind horizons. And what all the locals will tell you is aim for that tank. I guess they're calling that a water tank. And if we do that, we're going to end up lined up quite nicely here for the apex here. And then right about the time it G's out, as it settles in, you're braking pretty good. Turn right about here. Now, you can try to hit that apex perfectly, but all your known fast guys actually are blowing that apex off by a few feet. Then, running it out, maybe not, certainly not all the way out, but maybe half, 3/4, or 2/3 track, bringing it back in for the second apex. So that's definitely a double apex situation. At this juncture, your goal is to run wide. Your goal is to sweep out far to the left. Why? Because it sets you up for this next corner, which is pretty fast. Here you are. Drop the bike in. Pretty easy to identify your apex. You can see the whole corner. And again, the goal is to run it wide. You want to get it all the way out to the edge of the track. And just about the time you peek over this and can get a pretty clear picture of the whole scene in front of you, it's time to get the bike turned in. And your goal really is to straighten out your path from that turn in to this apex, and most riders are going to be braking pretty hard at this point. And then you're going to run it out, not necessarily all the way out, perhaps mid-track. And this corner decreases in radius pretty noticeably, so it's a later apex. Then we've got a short drive, short squirt of the throttle, got a little bit of a crest here, might even wheelie a bit. And this is going to be a later apex corner, and I should probably back up a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Something that's easily overlooked in this turn is we gain gain a little bit on our way to apex. We actually gain some camber, some banking, so it's more or less flat at this juncture, right? But then as we go in where we see that patch, we've got a little bit of camber. But then where the apex is, the camber drops away and it gets more flat. So this can catch people out, because while the rider might not be leaning the bike over more, the camber drops away. All right, now we've got a short chute coming into the slowest corner of the track. And this is where it takes a lot of nerve to leave the throttle open, because we've got a blind entrance. It drops off. Riders that are going pretty quick are going to start applying the brakes somewhere in this neighborhood where the curbing begins, depending on how fast of a bike you have, etc. But you see it just drops off right at the last second. And this is going to be a super tight, late apex corner. Then we've got what they'll call the waterfall, corkscrew, whatever you want to call it. The goal is to be somewhere mid to the right side of the track. Drop it down, hugging the inside. And then it's okay to run it wide coming out of here. And come in low, because this is a double apex corner. So we can hit this first apex, let it run out. And then from here, we want to hit a second apex, but we don't want to just suddenly dive down to the inside curbing. You want to draw in closer and closer and closer, but gradually drawing in to finally hit this second later apex. And from here, we've got a pretty clean shot up the front straightaway. Generally speaking, since this is a right-hand corner, we're going to drift out to the left. But it's a good plan to continue that arc so that you can get over to the right side in preparation for the front straights approach to the first turn. And the reason for that would be to leave the left side of the track open for passing. And that is one lap around the Ridge Motorsports Park without using the chicane. But there's a chicane there. We can look at the chicane too. Usually you want to brake hard right here at the bridge, and we'll see if we can thread our way through these cones. Here we go underneath. This was grafted on later, and you can see that there tend to be incidents here by all these marks, which is part of the reason why we decided not to use it. Also, if someone blows this first corner, they can get in the way on the second. But this is a quick left-right, and then hammering the throttle. We see lots of wheelie marks where they're setting the front wheel down. And then we return back to turn one. There's your tour.